The wind howled like a wounded animal as Marcus trudged through the knee-deep snow, his breath forming thick clouds in the frigid air. He'd only ventured out because his generator had sputtered to a stop, and he needed to check if old Henderson next door still had power. The blizzard had been raging for 2 days straight, transforming his quiet rural Montana neighborhood into an Arctic wasteland. That's when he saw her. At first, he thought it was just a drift of snow piled against Henderson's porch, but something about the shape made him look twice. His heart lurched when he realized it was a person, curled into a ball, covered in a thin dusting of white. Marcus broke into a run, his boots slipping on the ice as he crossed the property line. She was wearing nothing but a summer dress and a cardigan, completely inappropriate for weather that had already claimed 3 lives in the county. Her lips were blue, her skin pale as milk, and for a terrifying moment, Marcus thought he was too late. But when he pressed his fingers to her neck, he felt a faint pulse, slow and weak. Without thinking, Marcus scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and he could feel her body trembling violently against his chest. He didn't bother knocking on Henderson's door. The old man's truck was gone, and Marcus had a sinking feeling he knew exactly what had happened here. The walk back to his cabin felt endless. The woman in his arms remained unconscious, her head lolling against his shoulder. Marcus kicked open his front door and carried her straight to the bathroom, where he'd been keeping space heaters running. He knew enough about hypothermia to understand that warming someone too quickly could be fatal, but leaving her in those wet clothes would be worse. With clinical detachment born of necessity, Marcus peeled off her frozen clothing and wrapped her in every towel he could find. Her fingers were waxy white, a sign of frostbite that made his stomach churn. He carried her to his bed, piled blankets over her, and then did something he'd learned in his Navy days. He stripped down to his thermal underwear and climbed in beside her, using his body heat to gradually warm her core temperature. For 3 hours, Marcus held this stranger, monitoring her breathing, checking her pulse, praying she would survive. Slowly, agonizingly, color began returning to her cheeks. Her violent shivers gradually subsided into occasional tremors. And finally, as the winter sun began its weak descent, her eyes fluttered open. Oh! They were dark brown, almost black, and filled with confusion and fear. She tried to speak, but her voice came out as a croak. Marcus quickly got up, poured warm water from his kettle, and helped her take small sips. "You're safe," he said gently. "You were outside in the blizzard." "I'm Marcus. I live next door to where I found you." The fear in her eyes intensified. She tried to sit up, but Marcus gently pressed her back down. "Easy. You've been through hell. Your fingers and toes might have frostbite. We need to keep you warm and hydrated." "Henderson," she whispered, her accent thick and unfamiliar to Marcus. "He left me." Over the next few hours, as the storm continued to rage outside, the story emerged in broken fragments. Her name was Anastasia, though she asked him to call her Anna. She was from a small village in Ukraine. She'd come to America as a mail-order bride, full of hope for a new life, only to discover that Henderson was nothing like his letters suggested. He was cruel, she told Marcus, her voice barely above a whisper. He'd wanted a servant, not a wife. When she'd refused to do something, she wouldn't specify what, and Marcus didn't push. He'd locked her out of the house during the blizzard. She'd pounded on the door until her fists were bloody, but he'd never answered. She thought she'd heard his truck start up, the sound disappearing into the howling wind. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "He's not coming back for you. The roads are closed anyway. You'll stay here until the storm passes, and then we'll figure out what to do." Anna's eyes filled with tears. "I have nowhere to go. No money. My visa. I don't know what happens now." The storm lasted 4 more days. During that time, Marcus discovered that Anna's frostbite was mild, painful, but she'd keep all her fingers and toes. He also discovered that she was intelligent, funny when she felt safe enough to joke, and surprisingly resilient. She'd been a teacher back in Ukraine, spoke 3 languages, and had a degree in literature. She'd come to America not out of desperation, but out of a desire for adventure and love. Henderson had seemed kind in his letters, traditional but respectful. The reality had been a nightmare. When the roads finally cleared, Marcus drove to Henderson's property. The house was empty, cleared out. The old man had taken everything of value and disappeared. The neighbors confirmed he'd talked about moving to Arizona for months. Apparently, he'd ordered Anna, gotten cold feet about the whole arrangement, and decided abandoning her in a blizzard was easier than dealing with the legal complications of sending her back. Marcus made some calls. His sister was a lawyer in Billings, and she knew people who specialized in immigration. The situation was complicated but not impossible. Anna's visa was tied to her marriage to Henderson, but there were provisions for victims of domestic abuse and abandonment. It would take time, paperwork, and money, but she could stay in the country. "I'll help you," Marcus said when he explained all this to Anna. "You can stay in my guest room. I've got space, and honestly, the company would be nice." Anna looked at him with suspicion she'd learned the hard way. "Why would you do this? What do you want from me?" Marcus considered the question. He was 42, divorced for 5 years, living alone in a cabin he'd built himself after leaving the Navy. He'd been content with his solitude, his carpentry work, his quiet life. But finding Anna in that snow had awakened something in him. Not romance, not yet, but a sense of purpose he'd been missing. "I don't want anything," he said honestly. "Except maybe to prove that not everyone in this country is like Henderson. You came here for a new life. You deserve a chance at that." Spring came slowly to Montana that year. As the snow melted, Anna began to thaw as well. Marcus converted his workshop into a studio apartment for her, giving her privacy and space. He helped her practice English, though she was already quite fluent. She cooked him Ukrainian dishes that filled the cabin with unfamiliar spices and made him realize how bland his bachelor meals had been. Anna started volunteering at the local library, then got a part-time job there. She enrolled in online courses to get her teaching certification recognized in the United States. She made friends, joined a book club, learned to drive in Marcus's old pickup truck. She became part of the community, and the community embraced her. Marcus watched her transformation with quiet pride. The frightened, broken woman he'd found in the snow had been replaced by someone confident and vibrant. She laughed often now, her accent charming everyone she met. She talked about getting her own place eventually, maybe teaching high school English when her certification came through. And somewhere along the way, without either of them quite planning it, they fell in love. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was in the small moments. Marcus bringing her coffee exactly how she liked it, Anna leaving notes in his lunch bag with terrible puns in English that she was so proud of mastering, the comfortable silence they shared while reading on opposite ends of his couch, the way she grabbed his hand during thunderstorms because they reminded her of that terrifying night. 2 years after he'd found her in the blizzard, Marcus asked Anna to marry him. Not because her visa required it, her legal status was secure by then, but because he couldn't imagine his life without her. She said yes without hesitation. They got married in the spring, surrounded by friends and neighbors who'd watched their unlikely love story unfold. Anna wore a dress she'd chosen herself, and Marcus cried when he saw her walking toward him. His sister officiated, and in her remarks, she said something that stuck with everyone present. Anna came to Montana looking for a new life, and she found it. But Marcus found something too. Sometimes the person who needs saving is the one doing the rescue. Henderson was never found, and honestly, neither of them cared to look. He'd given Anna the worst night of her life, but inadvertently, he'd also given her the best one. Because without that blizzard, without that terrible abandonment, she never would have found Marcus. They still lived in the cabin, though they'd expanded it significantly. Anna taught English at the local high school and ran a program helping other immigrants adjust to life in rural Montana. Marcus continued his carpentry, building furniture that Anna sold online with beautifully written descriptions. On winter evenings, when the snow fell soft and gentle outside their windows, Anna would sometimes stand at the glass, watching the flakes accumulate. Marcus would come up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, and she'd lean back into him. "What are you thinking about?" he'd ask. "How lucky I am," she'd always answer. "How close I came to losing everything, and instead, I found you." Marcus would kiss the top of her head, breathing in the vanilla scent of her shampoo, and think about fate, chance, and blizzards that changed everything. He'd found his neighbor's abandoned mail-order bride freezing in a storm, and in saving her life, She'd somehow saved his two.